I am Joey Pepper-Mellusi of Shanker Beer Company, and this is Brewer to Brewer podcast from All About Beer. My guest is Mike Schallau of Was, and he is here for a conversation that goes beyond the brewhouse and into topics that matter to brewing professionals and curious beer drinkers. First, please visit allaboutbeer.com and follow on social media at allaboutbeer. And to support journalism in the beer space, check out allaboutbeer.com/support. We'll get into this conversation in just a moment, but first, this message.
Malteurop has long been a pillar of North American malting, and they're growing to meet the needs of the modern brewer. Their brand new warehouse expansion at the Winona, Minnesota Malt House marks a new chapter in their commitment to service and reliability. With increased capacity and optimized logistics at the Winona hub, Malteurop is delivering the quality you expect with the speed you need. Discover the Malteurop difference at malteuropmaltingco.com.
This episode is sponsored by John I. Haas on their new LupoCore Enhanced T90 hop pellets, engineered for peak sensory performance and ultimate peace of mind. Designed for brewers of all sizes, LupoCore delivers consistent sensory outcomes, reliable brewhouse performance, and scalable application across production volumes. Using Sensory Plus selected hops and Haas's advanced pellet processing technology, LupoCore elevates hop expression while reducing brew process loss, all without requiring brewers to change their process. Contact your Haas Sales Representative or visit lupohops.com to learn more.
What if the secret to a better batch of beer started before fermentation ever began? By understanding the way water chemistry impacts the sensory quality of finished beer, and by analyzing fermentation and other data, brewers can control sensory aspects of their product like never before. Sanos put together a free ebook that breaks down water chemistry fundamentals every brewer should know. No fluff, just the fundamentals. Download Water Chemistry for Brewers at senos.com. That's SENNOS.com.
Here's a story brewers know all too well. You walk into the brewery straight to the tank. You pull a sample to do a forced diacetyl test and you wait for it in silence. Something feels not quite right. You reach into the water bath and bring the flask to your nose, and it's a butter bomb. The logistics start running through your head. Do we hold the tank? We have accounts waiting. How many days until it clears? And then you wake up and remember that you use Berkeley Yeast Fresh Chico. It's got ALDC inside every cell, so diacetyl never forms in the first place. Through primary, through dry hopping and hop creep, diacetyl stays ultra low. So you don't have to add ALDC or wait for diacetyl to clean up. And most importantly, you don't have to wake up in a cold sweat worrying about production nightmares like these. Fresh Chico is now available in dried bricks for as low as $88 at berkeleyyeast.com.
Welcome. I'm very pleased to have Mike Schallau as my guest today. Mike has been brewing beer professionally for over a decade. He started at Pipeworks Brewing as an unpaid intern and rose to the ranks to oversee all daily operations, recipe development, and the barrel aging program before departing to start Was. He has grown Was Brewing from just an idea into one of the top saison breweries in the world. His beers have won multiple gold medals at Festival of Wood and Barrel Aged Beers. Mike has brewed collaboration beers on 3 continents, and he co-hosts the Beer Temple podcast. Mike, welcome.
Hey.
How are we doing, buddy?
Good, man. How are you? Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you as well. It's been a minute, but always good to chat.
Yeah.
So Mike and I met back in around 2014, 2015, I want to say, when we had a Pipeworks event at Torst.
Yep.
And then you and your father also came in to dine in at Luxus.
That's right.
And yeah, we kind of just hit it off from there and stayed in touch. During my time at Folks Beer, we did a couple beers together. One, not really our idea, which was a Malort-inspired triple, which, probably tasted as good as you think it would be.
Hey, Malort's good.
Hey, I like Malort.
You're throwing hands at
Probably
the
like
Chicago right now.
I probably like Malort better than the Malort-inspired triple that we made. That's how much I like Malort. But we also did a really wonderful spelt saison together called Rabbit's Moon that we more recently brewed a beer inspired by that beer. That was a buckwheat saison last summer. So, buddy, I just wanted to check in with you, see how things are going. But also, I wanted to see, I kind of wanted to just dive into saison today. Something that both of us really love. I know, obviously, something that you're very passionate about and have built this brand around it. So I wanted to ask what exactly got you into the style of saison and farmhouse ales, and what really piqued your interest to enjoying those beers. And not only that, but made you want to develop a brand that surrounded them.
Yeah, so when I graduated from college, I started working at this liquor store in Chicago called West Lakeview Liquors. It's kind of like one of the first craft beer stores and one of the first to have like a really extensive selection of imported beers, specifically like the Shelton Brothers book. And this was like right around when Half Acre had gotten their own space. And so craft brewing in Chicago was pretty nascent and there weren't, 80 breweries or whatever there are now in the city limits of Chicago. So the things that I was really drawn to and really inspired by were these like delicate, beautiful, farmhouse ales or mixed culture beers coming from Belgium, particularly Aberone and Blaugy. The Gen Lane stuff I really liked. Lots of stuff that like now kids these days don't didn't have the experience.
Sure.
But when there was, only so many options, like that was the stuff where I'm like, it felt the most like magic and the most like I don't understand how this is happening or how they're pulling these characteristics out. And that's when, Phantom was regularly tasting very good. Unfortunately, it's not always the case anymore.
Yeah,
But
the inconsistencies have definitely rose as the years have gone on.
yes, but you would have a bottle of that and you're like, how is this possible? Where, you drink an IPA and there's varying degrees of like technique and things that I'm certain I don't know how to do or things I don't really have access to that make those incredible beers now. But more or less, you understand the flavors of what's going on, and it's more of a trick of like balancing the raw ingredients. And saison seemed to be something that was more of a balance of like the technique and like the harnessing of the yeast. And there's a lot more going on with the actual fermentation that was very interesting to me. And so I started when I was homebrewing. I was a very bad homebrewer, but I was mostly making saisons. I just didn't have the patience, which ironically now all of our beers take at least 2 months, which is,
Something you've grown into.
yes, I developed the patience over time, but yeah, just like trying to figure that yeast out. And then, so when it came to this and doing this brewery and what has become, I'd kind of fallen out of love with what we were doing at Pipeworks. There was a period of time where like I was very turned on by all the adjuncts we were doing and all the high concept beers and all the things that like really genuinely felt new and like creative pursuits. And at a certain point, like it just wasn't doing it for me. There's only so many cocktails you want to turn into beers and so many fruit purees you can source and we had grown to a point where there were so many other people there that were at least as good, if not better than me at a lot of the stuff that I was doing simply because I was there as the company was like a rocket ship. So, I was sitting there and I'm like, I don't really like this anymore. These people are probably gonna be better at this than me. And I had gone to the beer temple and was like kind of sitting there being sad about not loving beer anymore. And I had a La Vermantois that they had on draft. And I was like,
Delicious.
oh, right. This is why I started like brewing in the first place, is I wanted to figure these things out.
Sure.
And so I came up with an idea of something that I thought would be interesting. I really wanted to use that Blaugy yeast. And I talked to my friend Noah, who's a friend of the program. He's been on this a brewer to brewer previously. But at the time, he was working at Dark Matter, but had like the homebrew setup that we could go and I could try these ideas out at that scale. And like the first thing we ever brewed in Noah's garage was essentially what Will Be is our flagship beer now. There's a couple of tweaks just because of availability of ingredients and like some, but more or less the idea of taking the Blaugy yeast, making a spelt forward saison with triticale in it, which was something that was there from the very beginning, with Grüngeist as the main hop, fermenting it in an open top container, very hot. Like all those things are what Will Be is in my head. And then things have been like colored or shaded around it to turn it into something that we can produce at a commercial level on a regular basis with consistency, but without losing the character. And I mean, I have a joke that like all of our saisons are basically the same saison with a couple different with a saturation turned up or down.
Sure.
Because once you find something that like really is effective, you need a really good reason to venture off from it. Like it's not true. They all taste very different. There's a house style here, obviously, but the end result is similar. But in the conceptualization of a lot of these things, it's like, I've discovered some techniques and things that really work for how I want the beers to taste. And unless there's a compelling reason to change it, we just apply different flavors to those processes.
Yeah, and I think that leads into a great segue of one of my questions is like, what do you feel like brewing wise as well as fermentation process really makes Saison? Obviously, Saison is such a broad term for the style that we're talking about, but at its core, at its essence, like as far as the grist, brewing, fermentation, conditioning time, like what is really important to you that makes your Saisons?
Yeah, I mean, so I know this is, I don't know, controversial, but if we ask beer dad Yvonne, he says there's no such thing as a Saison yeast, right? But I think in America, that's not true. That might be broadly true for like the whole world of Saison, but I think if you were to take a USO5 and try to make a Saison with it, it would be very confusing to people. So I think that the yeast character for me, is primarily something that makes it a Saison. And for me, that is ester forward with a little bit of phenolic character in the background, and then something that is very highly attenuative. And specifically, we're trying to get esters that are more tropical, pineapple, maybe a little bit of pear, as opposed to like banana or bubblegum. And we found that with the yeast we're using, which starts its life as Omega's Belgian Saison 2, OYL 042 for all those out there, all those index heads. But after the first couple of generations of fermenting it, we start fermenting at 80 degrees. That's the lowest we go on anything. Sometimes it's up to like 84 to 86 at knockout for like Bourgeois Daydreams, which is like a 6.2 Plato starting gravity beer.
Little guy.
Yeah, little buddies. Well, I shouldn't. That's Hopewell. But learning a bunch about like when and how the esters are formed in that. And so starting it hot, getting it above like 84-ish when it's really in prime esterification stage, like 12 to 36 to 48 hours, making sure it's warm like that. And we ferment all that stuff with an open top. So we have they're essentially Grundy tanks, but they have big 2-foot manways. So we knock in, we take the manway off, we cover it with some canvas, and then we also top grap off of that. So after 2 to 3 generations of getting that lab pitch of yeast, it is significantly more flocculent, and it is faster, like fermentation, like by a few days. And then we find that it is more likely to make the esters that we're going for after a few generations, where the first 2 or 3, the temperature is much more important to get it up there and get the higher ester character. We've also bred that typically phenolic producing yeasts, the phenolics are consistent across most temperature bands, where like if you're fermenting it at 90, it's not going to be more phenolic than if you're fermenting it at 68, but it will be more estery. And so the context of the phenolics feels completely different. So like instead of it being like very clovey or black pepper, it's kind of more white pepper, almost cardamom like, because you're getting these like base notes of the geranium or I don't know. I shouldn't try to like pull out what the actual compounds are. I got a music degree, not a chemistry degree. But we find that the thing that really affects the phenolic character is grain choice. So we tend to be very heavy in spelt and very infrequently using wheat. We find boosts the phenolic character up considerably, which sometimes we find. Like we have a wit beer inspired Saison we're coming out with that's tasting great, but that was 40% wheat, a little bit of spelt too. Because I'm old habits die hard. But
yeah, it's a little wild wheat, friends.
Yeah. So to define a Saison, I would say that fermentation character. I went a little off track saying how we get there.
Yeah.
That fermentation character, it being dry, I think is also definitional for me. I was talking to somebody about Tank 7. And I was like, there's almost nothing in that beer that I think of as like a Saison or a farmhouse ale. Like that's a Belgian golden strong ale to me.
Unless it's maybe in Saison Brett form,
Right, yeah. I don't think Saison needs to have Brettanomyces in it. Almost all of ours do now, just because we like it. And it tastes good. But we don't even tell people that a lot of them have Brettanomyces anymore. It used to be a big thing that we would call out on labels, and I think it just confused people or scared people. that weren't nerds. And so we want our beers to be approachable and drinkable for someone who has no idea what a saison is, and if it looks like they're trying to do homework or conjugate verbs or seeing words that have multiple syllables like that, that's off-putting, I think. So we try to treat everything like that, like an iceberg, where if you come into the tap room and you just want to have a couple beers with your buddies and not think about it at all, you should be able to come here and do that and feel good about it and have that goal achieved. If you want to sit at the bar and ask a million questions about, like, you know, esters or what Brettanomyces we use, like, we can answer all those too, but that's not the goal of what we're doing. We're trying to just have people enjoy themselves. And if your enjoyment of that includes nerding out, we can do that with you. But I think craft beer went through a phase where we were shoving education down people's throats a little too hard. And people needed to be a little bit educated, 10 years ago. And now they have enough knowledge to appreciate the things we're doing that I don't think we need to be too forceful about it. And it's like, when you're a kid, where I didn't want to read. And now that I don't have, because like I don't want to read this book you're telling me I have to read for school. And now I read a lot, but it's because I chose to do it. I chose things I liked. I chose to get into things I like. It's not like nothing wrong with Red Badger Courage, but I didn't care for it when I was in third grade.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, maybe 10-ish years ago, as, we were kind of in this height of, American craft like revolution of sorts with IPA and, lager coming onto the scene, and people getting interested in mixed firm beers. I think a lot of us were very excited to talk about what makes these mixed firm beers different and special. And we're getting into bacteria and yeast, and, it can probably overwhelm a lot of guests. And I think that's like a real key point to service, being able to express that complexity in a simple way to guests. And I think that's, very important. You kind of nailed it. I wanted to come back to, you said that you were pretty much conditioning most things with Brett. I know for a while there, you were essentially doing two different bottlings of a quote unquote clean iteration and then a Brett bottling. Are you kind of stepping away from that and going full towards Brett, or what is the story there?
We're almost entirely not doing that anymore. That was a
Gotcha.
lot of like academic kind of, like, it started off picking single strains of Brettanomyces that we would bottle condition it with and changing it every time for us to understand the choices of Brettanomyces that were available at these yeast labs. And then it morphed into a blend that we really liked. And then it turned into the blend for a long time. And now we have an idea of what those do and what we like about them. And other than Wilby, ironically, pretty much everything gets that blend of Brettanomyces. It's just repitched from bottles of previous batches of of beer with Brettanomyces in it, because we used to order a fresh pitch of this like kind of customized blend we made with Omega every time, and then I forgot to do it once, and I was like, well, Jesus, take the wheel, and we popped those and it worked really well, and it developed this kind of house character to it, even beyond just selecting the Bretts from a lab. And I think the way we do it is that we do primary fermentation with that Omega Yeast Labs 042, and then at around 2 Plato, we'll add a varying amount of bottles of the previous Brett beer we did, or whichever one we've tasted. Like, sometimes even a month after bottling, they're not like super expressive with the Brettanomyces character. So sometimes we'll go 2 or 3 generations of whatever it was back to be like, yeah, this is turning out the way we want it. I don't know why. I think that's just like developed from when we were bottle conditioning half of it with Brettanomyces, like that. I just started moving it forward, and then there would be stuff where I'm like, well, we're only doing a Brett version of this, and I'd like to give it a little bit of a head start rather than just doing it in bottling. And then we like it. We like it how it tastes that way. We get a lot of people saying that the funkiness is very subtle, which is the goal. It's
Right.
a seasoning. It's salt. It's not the protein of the beer. And we very, very infrequently use lactic acid bacteria at all. We have one beer that we actually just released on Saturday that is like lambic inspired.
Oh, cool.
But it's made of a mixed culture that's like the saison yeast we use, the Brett we use. I grew up yeast and bacteria from my sourdough starter, like when we started the brewery like 7 years ago, and it was 7 years old at that point. And then dregs of bottles we like. The only source of lactic acid bacteria that's ever come to the brewery is from other bottles or my sourdough culture. And
Is this the Levan series that we're talking about?
yep.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. The Levan. So Levan is like something you make in between your starter and actually making the loaf of bread. So
Right.
it's kind of like a nod to the fact that a good amount of that character is from wild captured yeast, but in the form of sourdough starter.
Very cool. Yeah, I love that kind of like naturally developed for you, where you started off with this one idea and then it just kind of organically took into, well, we're going to do it this way. Actually, we're going to do all bread, and then we're going to start pitching it. Do you find, just like with that Saison yeast, that those extra generations of the bread that you're pitching from the bottles is coming out better than fresh pitches of the blend from Omega?
It's a good question. We haven't done it in a different way in about several years, so I don't know if I have good data to back that up.
Sure.
It's coming out the way we want it to. Is like
And that's all you need, baby.
Yeah. And, typically, when we add that, the Brettanomyces will take it down from 2 Plato down to about half a Plato or so. We see it stop sometimes in the winter. We do sometimes add exogenous enzymes when it's slowing down. So we'll just add like 5, literally like in a 15-barrel batch of Wilby, there might be 5 milliliters of alpha amylase, just to make sure it's getting to that like 0.5 Plato, because we are naturally conditioning everything, like bottles,
Sure.
cans, draft. So, and I do pretty much all of our own deliveries and sales and stuff. So when someone's like, "Hey, this keg is foamy," well, that's a day I have to go. I spend out of my day. So having
Exactly.
finishing gravities, like, and we figured out that it is important for making a commercial product. And we found through a bunch of reading that the way that these diastatic yeasts really are working is that as they're doing primary fermentation, they're secreting amylase enzymes. And so the longer chain sugars that you think are being metabolized by the yeast are not. They're just, because it happens to make alpha amylase, it's breaking those longer chain sugars down outside of the cell, and the cell only ferments very simple sugars. So like Omega CRISPR'd out that gene out of a bunch of these Saison yeasts, and they don't really attenuate hardly at all. So it's like,
Wow.
it's only through this alpha amylase excretion, that thing that they have, that they get so dry. And so I use that as kind of justification to be like, well, like if it's not getting there because it's too cold in here, because we have a 30-foot ceilings and it's Chicago, and our building was built in 1909.
Been there in January, and don't ever plan to come back in January again.
You need to be more Malort when you're here in January.
Yeah, I guess so.
But I was like, I didn't really feel like that much of cheating, because it was just like helping the yeast do the thing that we needed to do, and it didn't. In my head, I don't think that that's changing the flavor profile other than the sweetness of it. If there was some like other metabolite or co-metabolite that was happening because of it actually consuming these longer chain sugars, it would have been a much tougher decision. But once we figured out how that yeast is actually working, it was like, well, this is just, at the end of the day, we're commercial breweries, right? As much as we want to say romantic and how like rustic or artistic this is, like I need to make something that is recognizable and consistent to some extent. Especially for a beer
and pourable by most accounts.
Right. And especially like something like, we will be now. And like the messaging you send in a can is very different than a bottle. Like early days when we were still dialing in our bottle conditioning, like things would be foamy and things would be, and that's not a good experience. It's not, I've never opened something and been like, wow, it's so rustic that it's all over my ceiling now. I'd rather just have it be a pleasant experience. Just correct. There are things that are correct, you shouldn't lose half of your beer. You shouldn't have the beer be so foamy that you can't drink it for 20 minutes. Like I love all those things, and I loved having all those experiences. I just don't want people to have them with my beer,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that's so key for Saison. Like you're saying, we are a business at the end of the day. Like we need to be able to sell our product. We can't just, write something off because like, oh, this keg was a little off, or this one too, and these people need help, kind of hammering all of that out. And then also just the advances in science that we've been able to isolate things, and Omega's been able to take that amylase out is huge, and allows, for you to do this consistently and present these beers as, keg or bottle conditioned beers, which I think is also incredibly important for the style. that
I,
mouthfeel, that specific kind of carbonation, you know?
I agree. I know that
Yeah.
there's some controversy around that where some people claim that like under certain VOCs, it really doesn't make a difference. But like, I mean, come and look at the foam on some of the beers that we're getting that are, 2.7 volumes because we want them to pour on draft systems. But like the texture is different, even from beer to beer. Like the texture from the natural carbonation can be a little bit different. But I have a tough time believing that people can't perceive it. And you drink with your eyes first, So if you see some like nice moussey, delicious foam, that's gonna taste better.
Absolutely. Yeah. You see that pretty cocktail walking across the room. You ask, what is that? And
Right.
someone with a very enticing cap of foam on a glass of Saison, also very enticing.
Yeah.
We talked a bit about Will B and, how it was brewed with spelt and triticale. I want to come back to that beer a little bit. When we were brewing together, I think it was almost the release of the first time that was going to be in cans.
Oh yeah.
And I just wanted to talk, how has that been going as far as having the Saison in cans? And, I think just like the mission of the brewery, just be getting people to drink more Saison and offering it in this package that is kind of familiar in the landscape of IPA and how that's going.
It's going really well. We actually have a tough time keeping it fully stocked. So
It's awesome to hear.
yeah, I mean, a lot of that is just bad scheduling, but and the fact that like tank residency times here are about a month. And we only have
Sure.
one. We have one 15-barrel tank that we brew Saisons in currently, and the rest are like 9s and 7s or 10s and 7s. So, we did everything in 500 milliliter bottles before. And while I still love that format, we still do it. We're actually bottling some stuff tomorrow. It is less approachable and way more expensive per ounce just because of how expensive glass can be. And when it was just me, we were making like 200 barrels of beer a year or something like that. I could find the places we could sell that and pull through. But there were just certain accounts, like even ones that, are craft beer bars or craft beer stores that are of a newer generation that just didn't see the value and didn't know how to sell it to their customers. And I wanted people to drink the beers. And so that beer specifically, I want to be very accessible. Some beers we make, I don't need them to be accessible, and they wouldn't make sense to go in a can. But that beer is
Sure.
like, that beer to me is like, people should be drinking it all the time. And so how do we do that in a culture where the predominant way of consuming beers or packaged beer is to buy a 4-pack of cans, is you put it in a 4-pack of cans. It's still exactly the same process. They are carbonated a little bit lower. Those are like 2.75, whereas bottles are 3.0 to 3.2.
Still high for cans, but yeah, definitely
Yeah.
a different story compared to the bottle, which can hold a bit more pressure too.
Right. And like there's also something you have to consider about the signaling you're doing to your consumer and the format, where most people aren't going to buy a $9 500 milliliter bottle and then dome it out of the bottle. So like if people are going to pour it into a glass, they're going to knock some of the carbonation out. So by the time they're drinking it, it's not 3 volumes anymore, right? And so
Right.
when you give someone a 4-pack of cans, they're probably going to drink at least some of them out of the can. So we wanted it to be like a similar drinking experience. And we didn't want to have cans blow up. So
That too.
but and like, we think we're a modern brewery existing in a city. So like having things in the format that people want to consume them in is the correct choice, I think. Whereas there's a lot of romanticism about a lot of the style that I can't tap into. There's literally a commuter train that runs next to the brewery, right? There's like, we're in a city. So this pastoral idea of like, well, they only had the green bottles because they were reusing them from champagne. Like, wait, that's not true for me. So like,
Yeah.
the authentic nature of what it means to make Saison for myself in the place we're making it, in the time we're making it, is different than what a lot of the like former like signaling things about what Saison is. So we take all of that into consideration. We take the things that we really appreciate and care about from the history of it, and then we also take the things that we either know to be lies or know to not be best practice, or know that there are better practices since those things were codified as lore or whatever they actually are when it comes. And this style there's no evidence for anything in this style. There's a lot of stories, But and like so
Yeah.
we choose the ones that we like the same way everyone before us did.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so great about the beers that you make. You're taking what is essential, for you to these styles and, adapting them to the modern world and the modern business and especially the current landscape of craft beer and using these cans and, talk about approachability. You want to be able to someone casually pick these up or potentially just drink it straight from the can.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I love that beer. It's a real gem, that one, Mike.
thank you. Everyone who works here gets like a copy of Farmhouse Ales, but like I want people who have
Sure.
never heard of that to like be able to pick it up and just like that's a good beer. And so it's that one specifically. Other stuff there's a little bit more like let's make it a little bit more esoteric and a little bit more nerdy, but Wilby is like you should just be able to pick that up and not even care what a saison is.
Yeah. So that's being brewed with spelt and triticale. Tell us a little bit about the local malters you're working with or local grain providers that are providing these special adjuncts for you.
Our boy Caleb.
Yeah.
Caleb at Sugar Creek Malt is his stuff is incredible. We started off we were using mostly Byerman just because that's the world I came from was we ordered stuff from BSG and Country Malt just like everyone else. And then over time, I started we started using some of it just because I was interested in it, and then we were making a very specific beer called Wisp, which I had this vision for like a smoked saison, and I knew Caleb was making a bunch of unique smoked malt, and I was like, well, it's probably like 3 hours away, but we drove down there to taste all the smoked malts and like kind of talk to him and understand what he was doing, and to find one that would work in a say like a super dry saison. And we found something called he was making called Storjol malt, which is I don't I need him to keep making it because it's incredible. But like he floor malts it and then he like hand kilns it over alderwood fires, and it's like this
Wow.
incredible malt that like I know has cost him years of his life from staying up all night to tend the fires and breathe the smoky air. But it's beautiful, and he also malts the spelt basically just for us. I think we're the only people that buy it, but he just I don't know what he's doing to it, but it often has this character of strawberries and cantaloupe that I just I didn't find in anything else. And I text him like, what are you doing to this that's different? He's like, it's just fresh. And so like when we were getting spelt from I think Best Malt and spelt from Byerman, it was good and it was doing what we wanted it to do, but it just wasn't. It's not as good as what he's making. And like one of the parts of the things that I like about the idea of saison is that it should have some locality and some like definition of the place. And so using as many local providers as possible is both just a way to live that out, but also it's just I like it as a business practice. So like we buy very little from large like producers, large suppliers. The only thing we haven't been able to really replicate at a local scale is the hops. We need low alpha hops for what we're doing, but that might change soon. That we might have a line on someone actually making some flavorful low alpha hops in America. Thank God.
Amazing.
Yeah, but we also use this place called Janie's Mill a lot, which is a grain mill just south of the city, and they custom flake stuff for us often. They recently had not recently, it's probably a year ago. They accidentally blended spelt and wheat into the same holding vessel, and they were like, "Hey, do you want this?" I was like, "Yeah, I do."
Yeah.
I
Yeah. It's
absolutely
perfect
do.
for me.
I was like, so I had them flake a bunch of it. I talked to a bunch of my friends around Chicagoland into buying some of it too, and I thought we had gotten all of it because how much they told me they had, and then I was like, "You guys don't have any more of that, dude?" They're like, "Well, we actually made a bigger mistake than we thought. And we have 10 times what we told you we had." And I was like, we're still making like 600 barrels a year. I don't know if I can buy 11,000
Yeah.
pounds of this stuff, but it's one of those things where now it's in everything because it was like a good price. It is delicious. And now I'm like, oh, I need to recreate this when we run out of this. But working with people like that are small enough to like care and to like, you know, allow us to ask them to custom flake spelt for us, which they don't typically do. It's a good way to support local economies, but also the stuff is incredible. The stuff is very fresh. The stuff is unique in a way where it's very minimally coming from large agriculture. Like Caleb grows a bunch of the grain on his farm. He's
Yeah.
he's brought dead, like basically dead versions of barley back to life to grow on his farm, and from like a handful. He like literally brought like a handful of seeds back from Europe to that from a place that would have matched the climate of Indiana and fostered that into the Edelweiss pills, which is like he's a madman. He's
Yeah, it's pretty
crazy,
amazing.
and he's like him. It's like he's one of us, where it's like he's trying to make unique, interesting things, almost just for the sake of doing it, and that believing that if he does that, that there will be a place for it, and I want to support that. So, yeah, we love Caleb.
Yeah,
Everyone,
I think it's really important, like you're saying, to support local agriculture, but it also kind of gives you a sense of place, especially for this saison, even you being in the city. It gives you that sense as well. And it also just provides more to like local character or a unique character to the brewery. A lot of people are using, Breeze, Environment, and Best Malls all over the world.
right?
And being able to support someone local that's able to provide something fresh and maybe is a little bit more expensive, but you're supporting them and their dream, and you're getting to use something kind of beautiful and unique that not everyone is using. And I think that's a really important point also for making these beers.
And we also
Um,
found that it's not as more expensive as we thought it was going to be. Between like the price of diesel, the price of tariffs coming on and off, it's actually, I think it's less expensive than environment is
wow,
equivalent partner.
yeah,
So like that's
even
a plus.
better.
We were going to use it anyway, but
Yeah, exactly.
don't tell Caleb.
Yeah, I'll start raising those prices after this. All right, we're going to take a short break for this message and then come right back for more of this conversation with Mike Schallau of Is Was.
Consistency matters, especially when scaling hop-forward brands. That's why Haas developed LupoCore, a next-generation pellet solution designed to provide superior finished beer character alongside dependable brewhouse performance. By combining enhanced pellet technology with carefully selected Sensory Plus hops, LupoCore helps brewers achieve reliable aroma expression and reduce process loss from batch to batch. It's a seamless upgrade for breweries looking to improve hop quality while maintaining operational simplicity. Learn more at lupohops.com.
It's here. Berkeley's Fresh Chico is now available dry. So many of the brewers I talk to these days choose Fresh Chico as their house strain because of how clean and versatile it is. If you want to make world-class IPA, your fermentation has to be ultra clean. That's why brewers have been turning to Berkeley yeast, because it is the only place you can get robust low diacetyl technology. That means healthy and highly viable cells that ferment fast and clean every time. At Berkeley Yeast, we worked long and hard to bring you Fresh Chico in a dried format. Now, Berkeley is the only place you can get next-generation technology in dried yeast. Period. And with bricks priced as low as $88 plus free shipping, diacetyl reduction has never been so cost-effective. Head over to berkeleyyeast.com and start leveling up your IPA today.
Malteurop has long been a pillar of North American malting, and they're growing to meet the needs of the modern brewer. Their brand new warehouse expansion at the Winona, Minnesota Malt House marks a new chapter in their commitment to service and reliability. With increased capacity and optimized logistics at the Winona hub, Malteurop is delivering the quality you expect with the speed you need. Discover the Malteurop difference at malteuropmaltingco.com.
What if the secret to a better batch of beer started before fermentation ever began? By understanding the way water chemistry impacts the sensory quality of finished beer, and by analyzing fermentation and other data, brewers can control sensory aspects of their product like never before. Sanos put together a free ebook that breaks down water chemistry fundamentals every brewer should know. No fluff, just the fundamentals. Download Water Chemistry for Brewers at senos.com. That's SENNOS.com.
All right, welcome back. Mike and I were just chatting about the great things Caleb are doing over at Sugar Creek Malt and using local malt as well as adjuncts in these styles of beer. Kind of tying into that, I wanted to talk to you a bit about fruit and the fruit that you're using in your beers. I feel like you are very much of a similar mindset to myself where, puree is just not exactly what we're looking for when we're trying to use fruit in our beer. These cell walls are getting blitzed from the puree process and just kind of creating a very pectin loaded fruit product, as well as it's kind of the idea of what that fruit is, like the idea or the candy generic version of cherry or raspberry or peach per se. So tell us a little bit about your fruiting additions in these kind of Brett forward beers, but as well as the Levan series and how you may be using those differently.
Yeah, so we buy almost all of the fruit that we use from farms in Michigan, Indiana, and Wisconsin. There aren't as many fruit farms in Illinois, unfortunately. Um, Most of it comes from a place called McClug Farms, which is on the western side of Michigan, which actually is like a sneaky, incredible microclimate for growing berries and peaches and things like that, as well as wine grapes, which is starting to happen now too, which is pretty cool. But yeah, we get the ethos is to get the ingredients as close as is reasonable to how they came out of the earth. So like I'm not Niall Zachary malting my own grain, and that's not reasonable for me. I'm not oasting my own hops the way he is. It's not reasonable, but it's reasonable for us to cut the pits out of actual peaches. So we're actually getting like 400 pounds of peaches tomorrow that we will cut the pits out of. Actually, we'll go through all of them, feel them if they're ripe. If they're ripe, we'll cut the pit out of it. If not, it goes back in the box for another day. Because we're small. We're gonna make 5 barrels of that beer. So
Right.
we can do stuff like that. We're not processing tens of thousands of pounds of fruit. So when you're a small brewery or small business generally, the things that you can do that larger companies can't, that's your advantage, right? Like even like
Totally.
breweries like even maybe double 2.5 times our size, it's going to be tough to like convince everyone to cut the pits out of 1,000 pounds of peaches.
Oh yeah.
But like we can do it, and we can get that done in a couple of days. And so we can make a beer that tastes of like the fuzz of a peach, which is like crazy. And like those are beautiful peaches, and just like about getting really good quality ingredients from a real farm that's growing them for flavor, and just trying to get out of the way of the fruit for most of those beers. So like the peaches, we do a bunch of berries from them. They grow wonderful berries. A lot of that stuff we get frozen because they pick it at the peak of freshness, and then they freeze them. And so in the winter, when we don't have access to as much like fresh fruit, like the peaches or plums or things like that, we'll process berries and buy frozen buckets from them, or cherries or something like that.
Sure.
But we have a series called The Finer Points of Bad Behavior, which is a fruited series and changes the fruit all the time. And we typically do about 2 to 2.5 pounds of fruit per gallon of beer for that series. And that's where the peaches will be going. And then for Levan, we started about 4 pounds of fruit
Oh wow.
per gallon of beer. And we just recently are releasing a huckleberry version of that.
Oh cool.
We were buying some huckleberries from our friends at Seedling Farms, which is actually pretty close to McClug. And it was kind of towards the tail end of the season. And I was like, I think I need like 100 pounds or 120 pounds or something like that. He's like, well, we have 150. And I was like, yeah, these are like $7 a pound. I don't need 150
Yeah,
pounds.
they can be expensive.
I'm like, I don't need 150 pounds. And then he's like, well, they're going to go bad. And I'm like, I'm only one man, dude. We're going to get like 16 cases of this. Like, it's already a bad decision. And so then I'm like, I only need the 120. And then he ended up sending the 150. So that was like 5.5 or 6 pounds per gallon of huckleberry, which is it was too much. It just tastes like huckleberries. Like the base beer.
Yeah, probably at that point.
The base beer is completely gone. It's very cool. Like the color is amazing. But it was too much. It was too much. But yeah, most of those are like 4 to 4.5 pounds per gallon. We did like Balaton cherry this year, blueberry, which came out really, really well. And then we've also been using citrus from a connection you set me up with a while ago that will remain nameless. So that you'll blow up your spot. But we've been getting bergamot from them every year for like the last 4 years, and that's just incredible. That's not 4 pounds per gallon, though.
Yeah, you don't quite need that much. That is a
No.
very expressive citrus.
I think that's like 8 pounds per barrel is what that ends up being, which is still quite a lot. But
Yeah. Yeah, that one's a delicate one because you don't want it to smell like grandma's bathroom at the end of the day. You want that nuance, but not, hit you over the head with a hammer on that fruit.
right. No, and like every year we get it, and I'm a little bit disappointed because I'm like, oh, it's just not quite as like we get this really interesting, like almost like Trix cereal aroma from that in that beer. And every year we're zesting, and I'm like, man, it just doesn't have that like that special thing going on. And then it goes in the beer, and I'm like, oh, right. It has to go in the beer to make this like crazy like thing. The fruit itself is still awesome, but it's like we're just like piney and floral, and I'm like, yeah, this kind of smells like citrus. And then you go in there, like for some reason, when it's diluted into the beer, it takes on this whole other character that we've never gotten from like yuzu or Meyer lemon or anything like that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, kind of like leaning into that, like what have been your favorite fruited iterations that you've done, or maybe one that surprised you the most?
That I mean, the bergamot one is the first time we did that. Like I thought bergamot was cool. We used it a couple times as like frozen juice at Pipeworks, and I was like, this is interesting. And then we got fresh stuff and used it in like the very first batch of Levan, I think we did a bergamot version of it, and I was like, this is exactly what I wanted every time. This is the beer. It's like that's probably one of my top like 5 beers we make, period. Peach is also like a perfect fruit for what we're trying to do. Their peaches from McClug are so good, and that beer is just works so perfectly. Then we've done some fun stuff like we made a beet beer that like
Yeah,
because we do a lot of this fruiting in food grade plastic drums, just so we
that's right.
don't have to buy like more stainless. And typically, what happens with fruit is we put it in there. Half the thing is fruit. We put beer on it, and then over time, like the fruit releases its juice or the water in it, and we end up yielding, say it's a 55-gallon drum, we'll yield 50 gallons out of it because all of the liquid from the fruit has like come out, and or we'll 45, 50 gallons. With the beets, we calculated it for it to be 2 pounds per gallon of beer, and they didn't give up shit. And so like
Yeah.
the yield was horrible, but like the amount of beer we got out of it ended up being like, something like 4.5 pounds per gallon of beets per beer yielded beer. And I was just like, what am I doing with I'm such a moron. Uh, no one wants this. Like only I want this. Myself and Todd from Fonta Flora, he wants that. But
Yeah.
yeah, that one is fun just because it's weird and it tastes incredible. That was too much beets, to be honest. Like it just tastes like beets. But at the same time we're doing a carrot one, and the carrot one is super interesting. Carrots without sweetness is a crazy flavor because all these beers finish at like half a Play-Doh. So you get
Right.
all the aromatics, and there's like a sneaky acidity to this thing that like it I don't know what it is. It's not a normal like lactic acidity, but there's like this like bump in the mid palate of like either acidity or something I'm ascribing to acidity that I've never had in another beer. And it just came from the carrots. And it's a really strange, really strange beer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. I haven't worked with a ton of vegetables and beer. Obviously, beet, I think, is one that people are kind of drawn to just because of like this beautiful color that it can make, but also like has this really nice earthy quality that can kind of complement what's going on in the beer. I know my friends at Wayward Lane have been making one kind of every year with beets and ginger.
Nice.
Yeah, that's definitely a very cool one. We were talking earlier about how, a lot of these saisons that you're making are almost coming from a singular recipe. So in like a taproom setting, how are you differentiating that draft list with mostly focusing on saison, and what else are you kind of offering to people?
I mean, we have guest beers on. We have, one of the rules we kind of made for ourselves is like, if we have a friend that makes a world-class version of a non-saison beer, I'd rather offer our customers that from our friends than have us make something that I'm not excited about or that I'm not that good at making. So
Totally.
we have like a Goldfinger. We had Goldfinger OG on draft. I think more than we've have had will be because I'm an idiot and production kind of got when we moved in here, like production got a little confused about timing and stuff. So we've had Goldfinger OG on draft every single day since we opened, and we haven't had Will Be on draft every single day. And then we always have a rotating like hoppy beer from Hop Butcher. We make a pale ale it's actually like a West Coast Pils, but it's all Midwestern ingredients, which is going to be interesting because Hophead Farms just shut down. So we might
Right.
run out of Michigan hops soon, but it's all Midwestern grains from Caleb and Janie's mill, and then it's fermented with 3470. anything clean we do here is fermented with 3470. So we did a
Yeah,
stout last year. We have a cider on, and then we make shrub sodas. So we make vinegar out of the saison, and then we use the same quality of fruit that we use in our fruited beers and make like non-alcoholic sodas out of it. We also have like a coffee on, but then we have 12 or 13 saisons on draft all the time, and most of them are defined by their adjuncts, to be perfectly honest. Like we have
sure.
Wilby's always on, and then Bourgeois Daydreams is our table beer. Um, and then we just put a wit beer on that's like tasting very nice. But most of the other stuff is we do a lot of stuff with hops that we don't sell a ton of outside of the tap room just because of the bottle conditioning process. Things can oxidize pretty easy if they don't take off, and hops are more sensitive to it. Now that we're canning, we're putting some more of that stuff in cans, but it was draft only, like hoppy saisons. And then there's like things that are like beer to guards or things that are in the saison world, but not necessarily adjunct driven. And we have everything on our draft list is $8. It just we just decide how big the pour is for you. So we have 16-ounce,
Sure.
12-ounce, and
Yeah.
8-ounce pours, and
It's kind of
depending.
like Pony Bar back in the day.
Yeah, I mean,
Every beer was $5.
yeah, you just gotta, sometimes you have to accept that you're kind of a dumb guy and like build in safety rails for yourself. And like no one can really ring in the wrong beer. So it's all $8. But then we also have like I think it's 80 bottles right now of beer cold and ready to open, of things that we've packaged. So there's a lot of options for saison.
Yeah,
And then, our bartenders are very, very good at really listening to people as long as there's like time. And like a lot of people don't have the language to describe what they actually like, but getting to
totally.
like kind of figure out that, and that doesn't mean they don't know what they like. It just means they haven't spent every waking hour since they were 22 figuring out how to describe flavors. Like we are the weird ones. They're normal. And so we do a really good job of listening and steering them towards whatever beer is going to probably be the best for them. And that includes being as willing to serve them an OG or a hazy IPA if that's really what they want, because we want people to have a good time here first, and then enjoy our beers should be part of that, but it doesn't have to be the only way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's like a great like key point to service. We just got to listen and, ask, what beer maybe is coming to mind or what flavors, and, are using our Rolodex to kind of put things in front of them and try and, hit that nail on the head.
Right.
I think it's really cool that you guys are making shrubs in-house, and obviously there's a ton of NA beer in the market. There's a ton of breweries that are trying or starting to make their own NA beers. Do you find that the shrub is kind of scratching that itch for most of the folks that are coming in looking for NA options?
Yes, the shrub is the number 2 selling thing in the tap room.
Wow,
It's Wilby and then it's shrub.
that's amazing.
And that's grown steadily over like the last 2 years. First, there's people not knowing what shrub is, and now it's people asking like, what is the next shrub that's coming out? And
Yeah.
I other than saying we should make these shrubs and that being an idea, like I don't have anything to do with the shrubs anymore. That's all my assistant brewer Ari, and he's very, very good at that. And the rule is he has to have one thing that everyone recognizes, and then he can do whatever he wants with the other shrub line. So we had a pop-up yesterday with a place called Mooncusser. That's like they do like oysters and seafood and stuff. And when we were concepting the pop-up, they were saying they might want to do a lobster boil. And we're like, that's cool. So Ari got it in his mind. He wanted to make a clarified butter shrub. So
Wow.
he bought like commercial diacetyl on on Amazon, and it's so weird because it's like acidic and sweet, and then it smells and tastes like butter, and it's so it's that. But we sold a bunch of it because people like trust him, maybe for bad reasons, but he makes these really crazy combinations, and more often than not, the things that they're looking at, they're like, I don't know what that is, but I know that I like what this tastes like. So I don't know how much the clarified butter shrub is gonna take off, but we also have a hibiscus one on right now. So
Right. That balance is key.
yeah. And it was important to us when we opened the tap room that the option to have something that wasn't alcoholic seemed as considered as the beers. Like anyone can just order Coca-Cola or have, water or something. But we wanted people not only to be like, to feel like they were getting something that was just as valuable as the beer. And it's on draft, it's like it's in the same glassware. It has ice in it is like kind of the only difference. But that to me was a big part of the hospitality of culture is changing. People aren't drinking as much as they used to. And what are you going to do with that? Are you just going to be mad at them for not buying more of your beers? Or are you going to make a space for them where they also feel comfortable coming and hanging out? We had someone write a 5-star Google review that doesn't drink beer. And so they just liked our space, and I don't think they even knew we made shrubs. They just thought we were cool. But like, you can bring your own food and soft drinks. And we're like, yeah, sure, I guess. But I think making those people feel comfortable was a higher order thing. Like, we make beer. That's one thing we do. But when we have the tap room, we want people to feel comfortable and happy to be there, no matter what they're doing there. We have like 1-year-old birthday parties all the time. Those 1-year-olds don't drink, but they like a little strawberry shrub,
Yeah, and some of their parents aren't drinking too.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a really important point, and it is something that is, just going on throughout the entire country right now. And, as business owners, not just breweries or brewers, we need to kind of provide that experience. We are an inclusive space, and we want everyone to have a good time here. Obviously, people are restricted by state laws, whether they can carry, wine or cider. So some people are having to be more nimble or more creative in order to offer, something that's alcoholic outside of beer, or something that's not alcoholic, and kind of offering something that's true to them. So I think it's really wonderful that you guys do that. And it's so cool to see how this program has really just blossomed there.
I think there's a subtle but important distinction between accommodating those things and embracing those things, right? Like having something because we're like, well, we have CBD drinks. Like, that's not the attitude we wanted to have. We wanted to be like, no, you are we see you as the same as all these other people. We made this thing for you. Like, just because it doesn't have alcohol in it doesn't mean, you're less valuable to us than people that are going to pound a couple Wilbies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's only something that's going to continue to grow. And I think anyone that's kind of pushing against that is going to have a hard time,
Right.
I think we were talking a little bit about Chicago and Pipeworks and how you guys were making, these big adjuncted beers, and those were kind of, the focal point of those years in the Chicago scene, as well as the rest of the country. What is king right now in Chicago? Has that changed over time? I know it's been a staunchly local beer drinking scene, but like, how have things developed over the last few years?
It's an interesting question. I genuinely believe that the Chicago drinking community as a whole is very diversified in what they like, and that I think there's a world-class version of almost every style of beer coming out of this city or the surrounding suburbs. So people coming from outside of Chicago trying to sell beer here, it's like you got to do something incredible,
Yeah, it's tough.
So, I mean, obviously IPA is still and always going to be king, but lager is right behind it here. Saison is people, especially in this neighborhood. We're down the street from Hop Leaf too, and so like.
Right.
Think that like we have an advantage because people are more familiar with Belgian beers generally because of how close Hop Leaf is. But people drink Saison. Like, Apex Predator is one of the best selling beers in Chicago. And that's a farmhouse ale, not from Off Color, which is incredible beer.
Yeah, John's been doing that a long time.
Yeah. And so like obviously IPA and lager, but people are drinking our beers too, like and casually or as intensely as they want. Like, they want to nerd out about it. There is like I said before, there's a genuinely diverse palette for people in Chicago. We also had a ton of German imports before a lot of other places because of the intense German populations here. And so people are more familiar with like really good lager before a lot of other parts of the country really had things like that. So it was, and even before there were craft beer, this was a huge wit beer town. Like, they would sell so much wit beer, so much Hoegaarden was sold in Chicago that has since gone away because of craft beer, probably, that people's palates have always been a little bit more. We don't get a lot of credit because we're in the Midwest, but people's palates have always been pretty advanced here. Like, we have some of the most advanced, Michelin-starred restaurants as well.
Yeah.
and we support them, like it's people go to eat these places. We're not just meat and potatoes Neanderthals and the flyovers like you guys think we are.
No, I've always been really impressed by the Chicago beer scene. Just obviously the sheer amount of breweries that city supports, and the diversity, like you were saying, as far as styles. I do think there's a lot of incredible breweries brewing different things within Chicago.
Yeah.
I got one last question for you, buddy. So obviously, took a journey from being just an idea to you brewing your beer at someone else's facility to now having your own. Especially during the current climate that we're experiencing and the craft beer industry, what would your advice be to someone looking to open a small brewery or small brew pub right now?
Have a point of view. Don't just open a brewery because you want to have a brewery. We don't need more breweries. We might need some more interesting beers, but we definitely don't need more breweries right now. So if it's just because you hate your IT job, I would consider not doing it. If it's because you have something that you don't see happening in the beer world around you that you think you can make and you can make well and get people to love as much as you do, then by all means do that. But it's not that easy. This is the only real job I've had. So I don't have another choice, but there's certain times there are certainly times in the process of the last 7 years during the pandemic and stuff where I was like, man, I wish I knew how to do something else. This is tough. And I'm glad I didn't. I tried to get other jobs, and I was just, between having a music degree and 6 years of experience being an idiot in a brewery, that wasn't very marketable.
That was fate.
But yeah, I mean, if you're trying to open a brewery right now, make sure you have some sort of point of view, and you know how you're going to talk to people about it. It used to just be you could be in your industrial park and really focus on making the best beers possible that you can make, and like that worked. And I think that was more the anomaly than it is the norm. You have to understand you're running a business and where you draw the lines around what you will compromise on, because everyone makes compromises, and then where you want to put the difficult part of your business, right? Like I put the difficult part of our business being potentially revenue and people understand what we were doing at all, because I knew I couldn't put the difficult part at not liking the beers I was making. Something's gonna be difficult, but you just have to accept what you're going to choose to be difficult and then figure out how to do it. I don't know if that made any sense. It makes sense to me, but
yeah, no, I agree. I think that's really good advice, especially, back in like 2017 and 18, you had all these guys with money thinking, oh, wow, craft beer is killing it. This market's just going to continue to go up and up. There is no bubble. And, we're starting to see those people start to fade away and the bottom fall out. And yeah, you need to have a unique point of view in this industry. And, that is why I think, is so special, because it is focused on, this particular realm of saison and mixed ferm beers. Yeah, man. Well, Mike, it was awesome catching up and chatting with you about one of our favorite styles. Mike will be back on the next episode of the show as the host, having a conversation with a brewer of his choosing. That will be on the air next week, so make sure you tune in for that. Reminder, visit allaboutbeer.com and follow on social media at allaboutbeer. To support journalism in the beer space, check out allaboutbeer.com/support. I'm Joey Pepper-Mellusi of Shanker Beer Company. Thank you for listening to the Brewer to Brewer podcast.
What if the secret to a better batch of beer started before fermentation ever began? By understanding the way water chemistry impacts the sensory quality of finished beer, and by analyzing fermentation and other data, brewers can control sensory aspects of their product like never before. Sanos put together a free ebook that breaks down water chemistry fundamentals every brewer should know. No fluff, just the fundamentals. Download Water Chemistry for Brewers at senos.com. That's SENNOS.com.
Today's brewers need hops that perform consistently, from pilot scale to full production. LupoMAX was engineered to meet that challenge, delivering enhanced sensory performance, reliable dosing, and scalable brewing efficiency in an easy-to-use T90 format. Backed by Haas innovation and sensory expertise, LupoMAX helps breweries create impactful hop character with confidence and control. Reach out to your Haas Sales Representative or visit lupohops.com for more information.
Tim Shasha from Berkeley East here. When I was the director of brewing at Cellarmaker, there was a time when I was really wrestling with hop creep and diacetyl. I'd be dumping liters of ALDC into the tank, at knockout, at dry hop, before cooling, just hoping that it would work. Sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. That's when I reached out to my friends over at Berkeley Yeast. I was like, why don't you just put the ALDC in the yeast? And the next thing I knew, Fresh Chico was born. Just like that, all my hop creep woes were gone, which was really cool. But an even bigger thing I noticed is that when I switched, all my beers were popping more. And that's when I figured out that diacetyl doesn't just mean butter. It was also dulling the brightness and intensity of my hops, masking those flavors even when D was below threshold. For me, Fresh Chico was a life changer. And now that you can get it dry, it's easy to use and competitively priced. It's the full package. Find out more at berkeleyyeast.com.
Malteurop has long been a pillar of North American malting, and they're growing to meet the needs of the modern brewer. Their brand new warehouse expansion at the Winona, Minnesota Malt House marks a new chapter in their commitment to service and reliability. With increased capacity and optimized logistics at the Winona hub, Malteurop is delivering the quality you expect with the speed you need. Discover the Malteurop difference at malteuropmaltingco.com.